Hello again, lovely people. We are watching American Gothic together, which is, I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. This is episode 3, Eye of the Beholder. The title here is in reference to, the phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's because there's a mirror situation. This one is about the custody battle for Caleb, mostly, and it has themes of family and home and that kind of thing. So yeah, let's talk about the episode. So we start in the hospital. Somebody's brought in for like a simple procedure, but the sheriff makes sure that it goes wrong, and the scene is pretty screamy, and it's like pretty awful. Caleb is in the car with Gail, and they're all heading to the hospital, so everyone's kind of converging there. And the sheriff tries to offer Caleb things, material things, so that he'll want to live with him. Caleb's not drawn in by this. He is offered like apple pie for breakfast and like train sets and a pool table, and he's just like, no. Good kid, Caleb. Good kid. We know that the sheriff is friends with the judge, who will get to decide who gets Caleb. So we kind of have all of the setup ready to go when the credits start. It's kind of funny. There's a scene where they reach the hospital and everyone just walks into the operating room where the operation is just going wrong, and the sheriff like fixes it because, he has evil magic powers or something. And we kind of see that the setup is that he's going to try and discredit the doctor so that the doctor can't get custody. And then we cut to our kind of our B story. I guess there's kind of maybe 3 strands in this episode. So we're at a church where there's like gospel singing, and they're having a Satan's funeral sermon. I don't know if this is like a real thing, but I found this really interesting for some reason. So it's like a mock funeral for Satan, and they have like an actual casket up front. And one of the characters kind of mentions that it's sort of more for the kids, which kind of implies that this is like a regular occurrence. It's pretty morbid, but pretty visually effective. So I'm kind of wondering if this is a thing that actually happens somewhere. But when you approach the casket and you look down to see like who is in the casket, it's a mirror, implying that, Satan is within you, I guess. But it's kind of the mirror's kind of cleverly used, because sometimes there's a moment where somebody looks down into the mirror and the sheriff appears in the reflection behind the person. And so it's kind of used. Mirrors are kind of a thing in this episode. So this is like I guess it's like a black church, I suppose. Like I've kind of heard that in the South, you sort of have like black churches and white churches kind of thing, and they're sort of different denominations or something. That's not something I know loads about. But we get, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. The actress's name is Nabush Wright, and she was in Blade. I've seen her in a few things from this era. I think she started out as a dancer, and I just love her. Like, I haven't seen her in loads of things, but she's really beautiful, and I find her very watchable. You know how some actresses or actors, you're just like, you love it when they're in stuff. So happy to see her. So the anesthetist, who is friends with the doctor, he is at this church. This is like their church. And this is his wife. I probably explained that really badly, but whatever. It's interesting because the sheriff turns up in the church. So obviously he doesn't have any problem being in a church, which I found kind of interesting. And he's trying to pressure the anesthetist, whose name is Daniel Trulane, so that he will testify against the doctor as to what happened in the operating room, to kind of discredit him. So he kind of wants to resist the whole thing, but we know that the sheriff's going to make life really difficult for him if he doesn't comply. So on the way home from the church, they actually get run off the road by a bird, and the sheriff just like appears next to them. And then later on, he sends because Daniel and his wife are like fairly newlyweds, he sends them a magic mirror that like curses the wife, and if he wants his wife back to normal, he has to testify against the doctor. So it's kind of cool. It's like it's almost like storybook, you know, this kind of enchanted mirror, but it's also, and like the frame of the mirror is kind of got these curlicues around it. So I kind of like that kind of storybook curse thing, but I also feel like vanity and being vain is sometimes like talked about in biblical stuff. So it's kind of like got this, I don't know, I just kind of like how they've pulled those elements together. Later in the episode, he wants his wife back and he doesn't want to testify against the doctor, so he smashes the mirror, and there's this really cool makeup design where the smashing of the mirror actually smashes her face, and because she's become obsessed with her reflection. Yeah, it's amazingly creepy. It's a really cool little like makeup design that they've done of like her face is like shattered kind of. It's really cool. Anyway, so that's one plot. The doctor resisting. He wants to tell the truth, and he's got all this pressure from Lucas Buck. Meanwhile, Selena is on the job trying to spin the story that the sheriff saved Caleb's life because Caleb is back at school. And Gail drops him off, and she has this backpack. This kind of, it's leather and it's kind of like a saggy shape. And I'm like, I saw it and I was like, everybody had that backpack in the 90s. Like, it was such a style thing. Anyway, the teacher tricks her into telling the kids about crime writing, and you just know she's being set up so that later they can discredit her because this custody hearing is going to come up. We also learn that people of the town are talking about how Caleb might be some kind of bad seed, so he's kind of becoming more isolated from his peers or whatever, his friends, but Merlin is there to comfort him. So her name is spelled Merlyn, and when he says it, it sounds like Merly with his little accent. He's adorable. But with my accent, it sounds like Merlin or Merlin, which is like King Arthur's guide. You know, Merlin's like the wizard in those stories. I don't know. I just kind of thought of that this time around, that she's kind of like a magical figure for him. Anyway, she turns up at school to comfort him, and she gets him to follow her to this beautiful yellow Victorian house. It kind of reminded me of the house in the 90s show Sabrina, or the house in Charmed, like that kind of Victorian build. It's full of cool stuff like masks and creepy dolls, and it's a boarding house. So the woman that runs it, she's really, really nice. And she sort of knows who he is, and you get the impression that she knows a lot of useful information. So she becomes an ally. But she also mentions that the house is built on a graveyard and the ground was never unconsecrated. So it should be a safe place. Yeah, so Gail has a few moments in this. She doesn't have like a lot, but she does go back to where her parents were killed, the place that burnt down. So we kind of get that. We have a scene where she bonds with Caleb a little bit, so we get to see that they kind of like each other, and they can talk about family and their connection, which is kind of nice. And she also has a little chat with the doctor about Caleb's custody. He's very reluctant because he was responsible for the death of his family. He's very reluctant to take on too much. Like, he doesn't want custody, even though Caleb kind of mentions he wants to go and live with him. There's some great transitions in this episode where we get just the sheriff's eyes and then like a stormy sky or some fire or like a crow. It's very, it's quite melodramatic, but it's fun. So heading into the sort of back half of this episode, the sheriff lets the judge know that he wants custody of Caleb and kind of points out all that he's done for him. He puts pressure on the anesthetist, Dr. Trulane, to talk about how the case went wrong. But there's a moment where this woman in this Victorian house gets Caleb to take a bowl of soup up the street to this white house, and we never kind of see what happens, but you know, he's a good kid. He helped her make soup. He's taking soup to a neighbor. And then we have the hearing. So the actual hearing just takes place in like judge's chambers or whatever. The sheriff dressed up for the occasion in his favorite black vest and pirate shirt combo. I was just thinking in this episode, he loves black and red and orange vests and shirts with big sleeves. It's like his look, and he's sticking with it. People just don't dress like that anymore. But anyway, we have the hearing, and there's a big performance of like discrediting the two people, like the cousin and the doctor that want custody. But the surprise is that a woman called Loris Holt gets custody. And so we find out that the soup that Caleb took, he was actually, the woman in the house sent him with the soup to see the judge. And so she gets custody. And yeah, it's a nice little like twist in the story there that I thought was quite nice. So we didn't know her name before. So we find out in this scene that her name's Loris Holt, and she is going to play a bit of a role in the rest of the series, I think. And I love her. I think she's great. And what else about her? Yeah, that's kind of it. So obviously the sheriff confronts the judge, and the judge is like, I'm not really in your pocket because what you don't know about me is that I have cancer and I'm dying. And Lucas is like, oh, you thought you'd clear your conscience? But then later a crow comes and the judge just like dies. So Lucas gets his revenge there. The wife of Daniel Trulane, her face comes back, like the curse is lifted because he told the truth. And she says that she doesn't want to run away when he suggests that they move away and just get out of the situation. She's like, nah. So that's kind of the episode. We have a nice little ending scene of tying all the little tales together. It's very cute. We're in the boarding house. There's other people there. It's got a really nice family feel. It's a lot nicer and more, like, it's got very yellow lighting, so it's kind of got that cozy look. Gail is there. We find out that the doctor is going to be living there so that he can kind of help out and be there for Caleb. We know that it's a safe space. And it's very homey. People eat together, and it's so much nicer than the home that Caleb had at the start of the series, where it was very cold lighting and everything was kind of black and dark and decrepit. So yeah, I guess we're all kind of set up for the rest of the series at this point. And we just end on Caleb settling into bed, and then Merlin comes in to say goodnight. And he's like really happy because this is like a better home than he had before. It's just really nice little moment. I feel like the two of them have this really nice rapport with each other. That's I know it's kind of cheesy. She's like she's not really an angel, but she's sort of, you know, the ghost of his sister and whatever. But I don't know. I really like it. So I think those two are lovely. And yeah, then we're all set for the next episode. Ooh.